I'm here to talk about wage and hour issues. And even in the circles that we run in of labor and employment lawyers, a lot of people's eyes gloss over when you talk about wage and hour. I happen to like this stuff. That probably means there's something not quite right with me, but we'll try to make this enjoyable for you. So a few changes that are coming down the pike. You're probably aware of most of these. Let's talk about minimum wages. On the federal side, the minimum wage is still stagnant at $7.25 an hour, which I do a double take every time I see that because it seems so incredibly low. I don't even know when the last time it was updated, but it's still there. Who knows what will happen, but that's where it is. The main minimum wage, as you all know, it's currently $12 an hour. And this year was the final year of the automatic $1 per year increases. So we're now out of that. And now we increase annually on January 1 of each year, tied to the consumer price index for the Northeast region. So it's tied to inflation. So every year around this time, the Maine Department of Labor will issue updates to say what the minimum wage is going to be for the next year. And they've recently done that. So for 2021, it is going to be $12.15 per hour. So that has impacts in a couple different areas. Number one, of course, is the regular minimum wage, but it also impacts your exempt employees to the extent that you have any. In order to maintain that exempt status for salaried employees, you are going to want to adjust their salary to reflect the 3,000 times of the minimum wage. So what that means is for 2021, the salary is going to have to be $36,450 a year, or about $701 a week, to maintain that exempt status here in Maine. So make sure that you take a look at that and ensure that you're in compliance there for next year. Something you've probably seen in the news is Portland has passed a new ordinance about minimum wage and whatnot. And I'm not sure if any of you have offices or do business down in Portland, but in case you do, I wanted to briefly talk about it. What Portland did was they defined their own thing called the quote minimum wage rate. And it's going to be in addition to, it's going to be more than the state minimum wage, and it's going to increase every single year. And I think it's going to start at $13 an hour. But interestingly, the way that they wrote it is it starts January 1 of 2022 and increases yearly thereafter. And then the big thing that you've probably read about in the news is they have this new thing called emergency proclamation pay, which basically says whenever the governor's declared a state of emergency like we're in right now, workers in Portland are entitled to this proclamation pay, which is 1.5 times the minimum wage rate. So a lot of people are thinking that that means beginning next month, the minimum wage rate in Portland plus the 1.5 times that for the pandemic pay or the proclamation pay is going to mean workers are going to be entitled to $18 an hour. I don't think that's the case, and there's going to be some litigation coming down the pike on this. The problem with the ordinance that was drafted is they specifically tied the emergency proclamation pay to the quote minimum wage rate. And the quote minimum wage rate starts January 1, 2022. So the way that I read it, and you might have seen this, the way that the city of Portland reads it, is the proclamation pay, at least in some schools of thought, will not take effect until January 1, 2022. There's been rumblings on a number of sides here that this is going to go to a lawsuit by proponents of the legislation who want it to take effect immediately, and others on the business side that don't want it to take effect immediately. I'm flagging that just in case you have offices in Portland. Keep an eye on this. I think this is going to get a lot of attention, and I think it's all but a certainty that it's going to go into some form of a lawsuit. But as of the moment, the city of Portland is not enforcing proclamation pay until 2022. So that's my state and local wage and hour update. It's been fairly, I see that we have a question. it says that's the state of Maine minimum wage, not the federal, correct? So the $12.15 an hour is the state of Maine minimum wage. So if you have employees here in the state of Maine, that's what you need to be paying them. And then the minimum wage rate, which I'm talking about in the Portland ordinance, is something specific to the city of Portland. That's not statewide. So other than that, it's been fairly quiet in the state of Maine in terms of wages and hour issues. But there have been several opinion letters from the United States Department of Labor that I think are instructive and helpful. And I'll go through some of them with you. So as you might know, the Department of Labor issues these opinion letters to help clarify the regulations every now and then. And one of the ones that they did comes from an employer who wrote it and said that they have this non-discretionary training bonus. And basically it works like this. The employee signs up for a 10-week training program. They finish the 10 weeks. They have to agree to sign up for an additional 8. And when they do that, they get paid $3,000, non-discretionary. You finish the 10 weeks and sign up for 8 more, you get the $3,000. Even if they never end up taking the second 8-week program, they get to keep the $3,000. The question is, does that $3,000 bonus count as part of their, quote, regular rate for calculating overtime? And this is what the Department of Labor had to say about it. Yes, it is included because it's a non-discretionary bonus. So under the federal regulations, generally all non-discretionary bonuses are included within the regular rate for determining overtime. So then the question becomes, how do you figure out where to apply that $3,000 bonus? And they said that under this circumstance, where the employee had to do 10 weeks worth of training to get it, you apply that $3,000 pro rata over that 10-week period. And to the extent that they work more than 40 hours in any week during that period, you would include that amount, the prorated amount, within their base rate to figure out their overtime pay. So just in case any of you guys have any similar programs, keep that in mind. Another bonus issue that the Department of Labor has addressed is longevity pay. And what happened here is a city had a program where employees who were there for at least 5 years got a $2 a month addition, longevity pay, for every year that they had been employed. And again, it was non-discretionary. If you're there for more than 5 years, you're entitled to this. And they had treated that as part of the regular rate, but they got a little tricky. They wanted to get clever with things, and they said, well, if we, instead of paying it out throughout the course of the year, what if we pay it out in a lump sum at Christmas time, and we call it in the nature of a Christmas bonus, because sometimes Christmas or holiday bonuses can be excluded from the regular rate. They said, will that take us out of this? The Department of Labor said, nice try, but no, that's not going to get this out of the regular rate. They said it's a non-discretionary bonus, so it's not in the nature of a gift. A gift has to be something that you can choose to do or not to do. And so it doesn't matter if you're paying it a lump sum at the end of the year at Christmas time or in each paycheck. If it's a non-discretionary bonus, you include it within the regular rate. So nice try, but it didn't work. Okay.
Josh, can I ask a question? We have a question
Sure.
here. There's some considerations if our organization is interested in hiring a competitor's provider who has a non-compete. Yeah, good
Yeah.
point.
Maybe we'll address that
We'll
in the
come back.
plenary session.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got 5 minutes left. So I'm going to skip one of the opinions to get to one that I think is more interesting. Opinion letter 15. And this is about compensability of time spent in training. So the general rule is time at lectures or meetings or training programs are not working time for overtime or for purposes of being paid if all 4 of the following criteria are met. It's outside their regular working hours, attendance is voluntary, the course or training is not directly related to their job. There's a couple carve-outs there. If it's through a bona fide educational institution, or it's a program offered by the employer that's similar to a bona fide educational program, Those are the carve-outs there, but the employee does not perform any productive work during the training. If you satisfy all those, you don't have to pay for training. So what they did in opinion 14 is they went through a number of different scenarios to say, would this be compensable or not? They use a lot of examples about online webinars. So if it's an online webinar that somebody can access anytime and satisfies continuing education credits for some sort of licensing program and is directly related to their job, but the employee will view it after hours, is that compensable? The DOL said that's actually not compensable. You don't have to pay for that. And the reason is because since it has continuing education component to it, it is the same thing as a bona fide educational program. And it's being done outside of work and it's voluntary. So that doesn't have to be paid. They run through a number of different scenarios here for training. I've only got a few minutes left, so I won't go through all of them, but you've got it in the materials. One last opinion letter that I do want to get to, because it, I think, is applicable to a lot of people, has to do with compensability of travel time. This is opinion 2020-16. So in this case, it's a construction company that has a physical location where they keep all of their trucks. And salaried non-exempt foremen have to get the truck at the beginning of every job, drive it to the job, and then bring it back to the work site at the end of the job to keep everything secure. And sometimes the workers, the laborers, will ride with the foreman, and sometimes they'll go directly to the job site. The question is, under what circumstances does the foreman have to get paid for that driving time? And under what circumstances does the laborer have to get paid? So if it's a local job site in the same town or close by where the principal place of business is, and the foreman drives to work, gets the truck, takes the truck to the job site, goes back at the end of the day and goes home, the foreman has to be paid for that time spent driving the truck from the place of business to the job site and back, because that is an assigned required job duty from the employer. So you have to pay for that. For the laborer, if they choose to ride to the job site with the foreman, you don't have to pay for that in this scenario. And the reason is, if the laborer had driven from home directly to the job site, that's normal commute. That's not compensable. And the fact that they chose to go with the foreman instead of doing their own independent commute doesn't change the circumstances. Now, to play with a little bit, what happens if it's a remote job site far away and the foreman and the laborers have to stay over in a hotel? Again, the foreman will drive there to the place of business, pick up the pickup truck, go to the job site. They stay at a hotel for a few days till the end of the job. Then the foreman drives it back to the place of business at the end and then goes home. And again, the laborers can choose if they want to go independently or if they want to ride with the foreman. Again, in that situation, the foreman has to be paid for the drive time to the job site and back because it's a requirement. For the laborers, it depends if they drive their own personal vehicle from home to the job site and the driving cuts across their normal working hours, that's compensable, even if they're doing it on a non-work day. So if Sunday afternoon they're heading out there to get a start on the workday on Monday, and they're driving during normal working hours, that's compensable. Same thing for the way back. Same thing for if they choose to ride with the foreman. If the ride cuts across their normal business hours to a remote job site, they need to be paid for that. And then the last one is the same situation where they're at a remote site with a hotel, but the laborers, instead of staying at the hotel, decide to drive home every night. They drive home and back. And the question is, do they have to get paid for that? And the DOL said in that, they do not have to be, for when they first go at the beginning of the job and home, it's the same situation as number two. If it cuts across their working day, they're paid. But in the interim, if they go home and back every night, they don't have to be paid for that. And the reason is because at the end of their day, when they could go to the hotel, they're completely relieved of duty. They can do whatever they want. They can watch TV, they can play cards, they can go out to eat. If they choose, because of their own personal preference, that they want to go home instead of hang out at the hotel and do whatever they want, that's not compensable working time, so they don't have to be paid in that situation. So to those of you who might be contractors or be involved in the trades and you have employees who travel to different working sites, take a look at some of those DOL opinion letters because they're very informative. I'm out of time, so now next will be Anne Marie Story, and she'll be coming to talk about some miscellaneous